He was Jamaican me crazy.
God damn it. Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. You can find us on Facebook, also Twitter and Instagram. Those are both at the Nerds Podcast. Like us on Google Plus as well. You can also check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com, which is kind of the hub for everything the nerds you're looking for. You can find all of our YouTube videos, which of course you can follow us on YouTube as well, the nerds you're looking for. But you can find that all on our website by clicking the Nerds You're Looking For YouTube channel tab on that website. You can also find both of our Letterboxd feeds. You can follow me on Letterboxd if you use that social media site at the Nerds Podcast. And then you can follow my co-host at that Tyler Hunt. You also can find all of the star ratings for any movie we've ever officially reviewed on the podcast. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. Of course, this episode is sponsored by our sponsor, Disney, who will sponsor us until they find out our offensive episode titles, and then they will drop us. That was a stupid joke. I am, as always, co-host with my co-host, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going well, man. So much to pimp.
Yeah, I know, right? I felt like I was forgetting something.
No, I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I regret saying the Disney thing. Like, that was a stupid joke. Like, as I was saying it, I was like, oh, I'm going to be cute and funny. And then it just didn't land as soon as I said it.
So we'll get into it with nerd news, but that's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, I was a little selfish with that news, and I was like, man, what if somebody goes back and listens to one of the podcasts where I say something really dumb, which is almost every podcast, let's be honest. But, it's out there. So who knows?
Yeah. And you're also in HR, so that enjoy that uncomfortable conversation that you're eventually going to have. But I do feel like I need to clarify that obviously Disney is not sponsoring our podcast. And I feel like I should say that because they seem like the type of people or company that would totally sue us. So I just want to be completely clear that that was a stupid joke and that they aren't sponsoring us and we've never actually had a sponsor.
Oh my God, if Disney sponsored us, I would go corporate so quick. I would totally turn on all of my beliefs and just do whatever they wanted us to, like realistically.
No, I mean, I know that you're kind of only kidding, but we've legitimately had people offer to sponsor us before, and I've just felt weird about it because I'm like, we say weird shit on this podcast, and I just feel like I would, even if I didn't like overtly be like, oh, we need to censor ourselves, I feel like that would be kind of in the back of my head the whole time. Like, we literally, one Indie PopCon had a guy come up from I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it was like a tech school, like a
rape
computer programming or something school. And he was like, yeah, we definitely are interested in sponsoring you guys, like paying your fees and all that good stuff, as long as you obviously plug our school. And I thought to myself, like, that's a school, and we have an episode called Cunt Radar. Like, I don't know if that necessarily would go hand in hand. So obviously, we just said no because I would feel weird about it.
For one thing, it's not like other podcasts you listen to where it's like, this episode's brought to you by Dollar Shave Club or something like that.
Yeah.
And they just want their shit sponsored. Like, they wanted to, like, us to use their studio and, kind of brand us. And that definitely felt weird. And also, I'm 100% sure as soon as we, like, went to that school or whatever and recorded a podcast or anything, like, he was totally going to Buffalo Bill us and wear our skin like a trench coat.
So let's be real, though. You think that about everyone. Like, you are super paranoid about everyone that we've ever met. Like, I'll say, oh yeah, that guy was kind of weird, or like he was social awkward. He's like that, and you'll be like, that dude's gonna rape us. Like, your mind goes there so quick.
Well, in all fairness, I'm sitting here with my skin still, so it's gotten me this far.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the joke's on me. Like, you've never been raped, so I guess good on you.
We'll see which one of us is being worn like a trench coat first.
Yeah, that's our new Rotten Tomatoes bet. Like, right there, who's gonna get raped first?
You're going really, really heavy with the rape, and I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable.
I only do that because I know how uncomfortable. I don't know if it's the word rape or the way that I say the word rape that makes you so uncomfortable.
You know, I really wasn't planning on getting into a conversation on what makes me uncomfortable about rape on the podcast.
Oh, man. So, yeah, we are definitely not sponsored by Disney, and please don't sue us.
Well, I mean, at this rate, we're never going to be sponsored by anybody. Like, we just spent a good minute talking about rape.
And then the term Buffalo Bill was used as a verb, so that's not great. Yeah, so let's just get right into it before we dig ourselves any deeper. We start each episode off by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
So I watched the new HBO documentary, Robin Williams, Come Inside My Mind, which is something that I was looking forward to quite a bit. But at the same sentiment, this was one of those documentaries that you really want to watch, but that you're almost scared to a certain extent, because you know what lies ahead in the documentary. I mean, obviously, we all know that Robin Williams killed himself in 2014, and I really wasn't looking forward to that part of the documentary. With all of that being said, you know, I was looking forward to it because I've said on the podcast before, like, I really do miss having Robin Williams around in pop culture. His work obviously meant a lot to me growing up, and I came to appreciate his more serious stuff as I got older and more into film. And again, I know I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but his death is probably the celebrity passing that impacted me the most. And it's weird because I really do continue to think about him and him not being around anymore to this day. And that's not typical of me when celebrities pass away. So all of that being said, like, I was really looking forward to the documentary. I mean, as a performer, I really liked. He has this larger than life personality, and it was so hard to imagine him depressed and in a bad place, and it was pretty scary, actually. So, like, with all of those thoughts, like, I was really interested to see how this documentary was going to explore that. I mean, it's called Come Inside My Mind, so it promised to kind of delve into the psyche of Robin Williams. And at the end of the day, it's a really good documentary, but whenever it ended, it left me feeling pretty empty afterwards, which was weird. The documentary itself is definitely layered. There are, of course, interviews with some of the people that were closest to Robin, like one of his sons, one of his ex-wives. Billy Crystal was in there, Eric Idle, Steve Martin, David Letterman, amongst others. But it's also layered with audio from Robin Williams himself from interviews he had done, where he provides his own accounts of his thought process and why he performed the way he performed. The documentary touches on most of his career and it examines his childhood. It examines his stand-up career, his TV work with Mork and Mindy, and then it touches on some of his films as well. And it also, of course, dives into his personal issues. So from his drug and alcohol abuse at various points in his life to his failed marriages, and of course, the issues that led to his suicide. So for me, you know, that's pretty heavy stuff. And I would say the portions of the documentary that really shined for me were when they showed clips of his stand-up or of him on talk shows. There's also a great bit that he did at the Critics' Choice Award when he lost for 1 hour photo that I really enjoyed. I had never seen this video before, but basically he was up for it. Jack Nicholson was up for it for About Schmidt, and Daniel Day-Lewis was up for this award for Gangs in New York, and it was a tie. and Jack Nicholson and Daniel Day-Lewis won, and he didn't get it. And I guess Jack Nicholson gets up there and he asks Robin to come up and do a speech for him, and Robin Williams goes up there and does like a Jack Nicholson impression, but then it just spirals out of control, and he starts railing on him about how it's a three-way tie, and a two-way tie, and he was like the only loser. And it's really funny stuff, and that kind of stuff that was sprinkled throughout the documentary is really what hit for me. But I would say my absolute favorite stuff they showed was the behind the scenes and the outtakes from some of his work. There were tons from Mork and Mindy, and then there was a really funny outtake of him with Elmo whenever he was on Sesame Street that was really good. So there's also this portion, like just from a behind the scenes perspective, where they talk with the director of 1 Hour Photo about how, even when he did serious movies, Robin would still need to be goofy and outrageous behind the scenes to kind of get it all out before doing a serious performance. So they show him doing a scene in that movie in a goofy manner, and then they show the exact scene that was used in the movie where he's like deadly serious. So it kind of does give some insight into his psyche and how he kind of operated on those types of movies. It's like little bits like this that were littered throughout the documentary that really let you see inside his mind as a performer. So, I mean, obviously the documentary does eventually get to 2014 where Robin killed himself. It's definitely a tough portion to watch, and in a way it kind of wraps up the documentary. For me, I think that's why I walked away feeling so empty. I know that it was a look inside his mind, but I think I wanted this to be a celebration of him and as a person and a performer. And those pieces were definitely there, but it ends so somberly, which is not how we knew him as the audience. So that was a bummer. So I would say at the end of the day, it's a great documentary, but just be prepared to have some of your heartstrings pulled on there towards the end and throughout it.
Yeah, so as we do occasionally, like we'll just shoot each other a text, like when there's something that's come out or like comics or something, whatever, that we have a feeling that the other might want to watch or read or whatever, we will call dibs on it, just so for the sake of conversation, we're not talking about the same thing. And you actually called dibs on this earlier in the week. I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday. You're like, hey, I'm gonna watch this, and it just so happened you sent that text like an hour after my wife was like, hey, I'm gonna watch this documentary. Do you want to watch it with me? And I was like, no, I don't think I'm ready for that. Like, as silly as that seems, like, because obviously neither one of us has ever met the man, it just, like you, it definitely impacted me. I'm not sure. It's like, how do you quantify, like, oh, his death meant more to me than this other person's death? Like, it's hard to quantify that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I've watched Night of the Living Dead since George Romero passed. I don't feel like I'm ready. I guess I watched Jumanji before the second one came out, so I have seen one of his films since he passed. But yeah, I really have like stayed away from Hook or any other his other movies just because I feel like I'm not ready for it. So I just ended up playing Fortnite that night while my wife watched the documentary, which is, it sounds like most of it, because that was kind of her consensus, was that you don't really see a ton of that stuff until like later in the documentary, and it's really not that long according to her. So I think I still would be interested in seeing this eventually, but yeah, I don't know if I could handle it.
Yeah, I think I was the opposite when he passed away. Like I binged a lot of his movies after he died. So I think that we had definitely like an opposite approach to that. But that being said, like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like 4 years later and it's a guy I never knew, but it's still something that I think about often, which I know is strange, but it is what it is. And I mean, I would recommend the documentary, I guess, if you're ready for something like that. So that being said, what are you into?
So I had this whole thing about Equalizer 2 because I went and saw that on Thursday. I've talked about this a lot recently. I'm kind of over Movie Pass. I'm officially over Movie Pass. I canceled it the other day before they billed me for another month. And it was weird because I kind of had, I guess, the opposite reaction to how I should have had. So I signed up for AMC's A-List a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, well, I'm going to use this. And since I've already paid for Movie Pass, the month of Movie Pass, that I'll just kind of use it if there's something that I want to go see at these other theaters. But for the most part, I'm going to use AMC A-List for the next couple of weeks, and then I'll just cancel Movie Pass. And what I should have done is I should have used Movie Pass as much as I physically could just to turn the knife a little bit, because I fucking hate them. And I realized, like, after I canceled it, like, I have literally not used it since I signed up for AMC A-List, because I was like, well, I don't want to support them in any way. But their business model, if you think about it, their only way that they could make money is if you don't use it. Like, they're counting on people signing up for it thinking, oh, well, it's $10 a month. I don't really need to use it if I don't have to. And, like, forgetting about it and not going to see a movie. And then that's how they make their profit. They don't make profit off of me and you. Like, that's not how their business model works. And I will say that I just listened to an episode of The Obsessive Viewer, and they talk about this quite in depth. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. It's the episode where my good friend Mike drops in. So if you want a more in-depth conversation about how that works, definitely check out that episode. But yeah, so I kind of had the opposite reaction. I should have been using it the most I possibly could to screw them over. Not that it would really matter. One person's really not going to make a difference. But yeah, I kind of had the opposite reaction, but I'm really loving it so far. I've been able to plan my movies now. Like, I can make the advance tickets. Like, I can buy them using the A-List, which I think is fantastic, because I was always really anxious whether or not I was going to get a good seat with Movie Pass, and I stopped seeing movies on Thursday because I couldn't do that, or I would have to buy my ticket out of my own pocket if I really wanted to see, like, an Infinity War or Deadpool or Star Wars, like anything, like a big movie. I was afraid that I wasn't going to get a good seat, or wasn't going to be able to see on Thursday, and something was going to get spoiled for me. So I would just pay for that out of my own pocket. So it's nice to have something that I know I can do that, and I can start planning, because I really like planning things for some reason. It's just a weird thing that I like doing. I get pleasure out of it for some strange reason. But anyways, all that being said, I was going to talk about Equalizer 2, but then kind of at a spur of the moment, I saw that Sorry to Bother You was playing at our local AMC, and I was like, man, these indie weird movies don't come to Evansville very often, so if I don't see it tonight, I'm probably not going to see it. So I definitely made a special trip to see another movie in theaters this week, and I still, like, as I was sitting down to see this movie, I still was like, okay, well, I'm still going to talk about Equalizer 2, because I had a whole thing that I wanted to talk about it with it. And then this movie started, and I was like, there's no way I can't not talk about this movie, because it was something, man. So if you're not aware, if you're like me and you're not sure exactly what this movie is all about, because I knew nothing about it going in. The only thing I knew about it going in was Lakeith Stanfield, who is best known, I think, for Atlanta, and then he's also in Get Out, of course. He stars in this movie, and this was kind of the first thing that I've seen him in that he was absolutely the star of, because obviously in Atlanta, Donald Glover is the star, and then Get Out, I'm not going to butcher his name, but obviously Danielle, whatever his name is, was the star of that movie. But he is great in both of those things as kind of the supporting role. So I was definitely interested in seeing him in a movie that he is for sure the star of. I knew that he was in it, and that it was getting great reviews. And other than that, I had no idea. Didn't see a trailer for it, didn't see anything. So I went in completely fresh for this movie. And I definitely think that you should be completely fresh going into this movie. I will give a little bit of synopsis, and obviously I'm going to talk about the movie, but I'm not going to spoil anything that happens in this movie, because I definitely think it's the way that you should go into it. So he plays a guy named Cassius Green, who is struggling to make ends meet while also kind of having a crisis. He's wondering what his purpose in life is. And to pay the bills, he takes a job as a telemarketer, and he finds out that he's actually really good at selling people shit that they don't need. Like, he's really good at being a telemarketer, and quickly he gets a promotion to what they call a power caller. And basically the shit hits the fan, so to speak, after he gets that promotion. And this movie was written and directed by a guy named Boots Riley, who was not somebody that I'd ever heard of before. Apparently, this is his feature film debut. He's a musician mostly. He's done some like soundtrack work for certain movies before, but this is, from what I understand, his first feature film, but also just his first film in general. So I was really surprised that he was able to get this film made, because it is really fucking weird. Like, I loved this movie about 3/4 of the way in. Like, I was like, man, I was ready to put this on my top 10. Like, I was ready to put it in my Letterboxd, my private list that I have on Letterboxd, which, again, you can follow me at The Nerds Podcast. Follow Tyler at that Tyler Hunt on Letterboxd. I was ready to put this movie in that list, like 3/4 of the way in, because it is really weird, but weird in the best way. Like, it's really kind of has a weird sense of humor, but it's so unique. Like, for example, so when he first starts becoming a telemarketer, like the way that they show him making his calls, like literally he'll call somebody and then his desk just drops in that person's house and he's like sitting next to the person as he's talking to him. Like, that's such a cool way to show that conversation. You wouldn't expect that from essentially a rookie director to do something weird like that and do it so well. So I was completely blown away by how just weird, but weird in a good way this movie was. Another example of that is they talk about how, like, all these African American guys always have their white voice, and when he's a telemarketer, he should talk to these people in his white voice. And literally, when he does his quote unquote white voice, David Cross actually does the voice. And like, there's another character in the movie that does a white voice, and his white voice is Patton Oswalt. It's so weird, but so fucking hilarious. Like, it's so well done. And I like I said, was so ready to put this in my top 10 of the year. And then the fucking third act happened. And I'm not going to say what actually happens in the third act, because again, I think you should see this movie, regardless of how weird it got. But I will put it up with Tusk as one of the weirdest movie-going things, like experiences I've ever had. It takes such a turn by the third act that I was just like, when you first see what you see, the character is on drugs. So I'm like, is this just a bad trip, or are we really seeing this? You're really fucking seeing it. And it is one of the most disturbing things I think I've ever seen in a film. Like, that was the moment I was like, I can't not talk about this movie, because I had a hard time going to sleep last night because I was thinking about it. And if you subscribe to that whole theory, like movies need to make you think and need to kind of hang on you, you're going to love this movie, because I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was so disturbing and so weird. Like, this movie is weird the whole time. Like, it's at like a 6 or a 7 the entire movie. But then by the third act, they definitely turn it up to 11. And I appreciate what they're trying to do, but it was just so over the top that I just, man, you got to see this movie, because even if I told you what happened, I don't know if you would believe me. Like, I told my wife, and she like immediately was trying to like Google a picture of it, because it's so fucking weird.
Yeah, man, you're not really selling me on it. Like, you had me like hook, line, and sinker. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go see this afternoon, because I almost saw it last night, but then I watched Luke fucking Cage instead. But I almost went to see it, but I don't know that I want something branded into my brain, especially if it's in line with something like Tusk, because that walrus from Tusk still is like very prominent in my brain. I don't know that I need that in my life, so I'm kind of curious. I mean, at some point I'll see this movie, but I don't know that I'm rushing out to see it as soon as we get done recording today.
with a movie like Tusk, you kind of know it's coming because it's called Tusk. And I mean, that's such an indie movie that I think most people that saw that movie knew what it was going to be because they're Kevin Smith fans, or they heard from somebody like, you need to see this weird walrus movie. So I think you're even prepared for it. This movie, it takes such a hard turn. I was not prepared for it at all. And I think that's what kind of affected me the most. It is super, super disturbing and super weird. But the fact that it takes such a hard turn is what kind of just completely took me off guard.
Interesting, man. Like you definitely set that up really good, because it's one of those things where I'm almost so curious that I'll probably have to go see it. But I appreciate the heads up that it's gonna fuck with me, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think ultimately, and I haven't actually given it an official star rating on my Letterboxd yet, but I think I'm kind of leaning to like in between 3.5, somewhere in that range. Probably 3.5 because, like I said, it's not necessarily even bad. I don't even want to say that it's bad. It's just so fucking weird and such a hard turn that it kind of took me out of the movie. But I love the first 3/4 of this movie.
Gotcha, man. Yeah, I'm gonna just be sitting here the rest of the time we're recording, curious about this movie now. So
definitely go see it, man. I think that you'll like it for the most part. I think you'll have probably a similar reaction than I did, mostly because we think alike a lot on most of these movies.
Yeah, man. That's weird. I don't know how we're gonna move on from this, but okay, cool.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
You mentioned in what we were into that we typically like need to call dibs on stuff on occasion so that we have something different that we're talking about on the podcast. And we didn't do that with comics. And I know you've been talking about a lot of number ones, so I hope that we don't double up here.
No, I'm not talking about number one this week.
Okay, good deal. So I read Die, 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 number one, which is put out by Image, written by Robert Kirkman and Scott Gimple, who, of course, are very well known for The Walking Dead. Scott Gimple was the showrunner for The Walking Dead, I think, from like season 2 or 3 to season 8. And then, of course, Robert Kirkman is Robert Kirkman. And then it was drawn by Chris Burnham, who also did the art for, I think, Batman Inc. back when that was a thing. So the big thing with this comic was that it was a surprise release. There was no build up to this comic. There was no marketing. It was announced like a week or a day or something like that before it came out. And then at the back end of the comic, Robert Kirkman writes a piece about this aspect of it and compares it to when he was a teenager reading comics in the 90s. You would go into the shop and you wouldn't necessarily know what was coming out. You just showed up to see what was on the rack. So in his mind, the internet has drained all surprise and anticipation from comics. And I think that's all fine and good, and that's definitely one way to think of it. And I know that musicians have done this over the last few years with like dropping surprise albums. But at the end of the day, what really matters is if the comic is good or not. And in this case, it is not. So this book is about a secret organization that works within the government to assassinate people that don't deserve the gift of life. So it kind of reminds me of Jigsaw from the Saw movies in a way, but it's more straightforward and structured because obviously these people work for the government and they're assassinating people that, they think that will have like a butterfly effect. Like if this person is dead, better things will happen. Better things will happen for everybody else, is kind of the mindset that they have. Since this book came out of nowhere, I think that there's a curve here where it's still figuring out what it wants to be. Each act of this first issue feels completely different from one another. You have like the opening scene, which is an action scene where somebody ends up getting their nose cut off. Then you have another like act where there's some exposition with the senator who runs the program and is kind of portrayed a la Hillary Clinton. And then there's a weird scene in the third act where one of the agents that works for this organization has a conversation on the way to a hit where he talks about taking the word pussy back. When it comes to using that word to say somebody's weak and scared, he says realistically a ball sack is what's weak. So that's what he's going to start using whenever he's talking in those terms. And it's an out of nowhere conversation, and it's not original at all because I've heard that anecdote before. So I thought that it was weird that they spent so much time on that in this issue, which was strange. And by the end of the first issue here, it felt more like a chore to read than a build up to things that were going to come down the pike. So this is an ongoing series. It's not a mini series, so they're going to have a lot of time to tell the stories they want to, but you still have to hook the audience in with this first issue, and they don't do that. On top of all of that, the art is really bloody, but it's really cartoonish as well. So I thought that it looked kind of silly. So I was never bought into the visuals, which hurt the book as well, in my opinion. So realistically, I think at some point, some writers get a pass and are held with high regard because of their other work. And for Kirkman, it's obviously The Walking Dead and even to a lesser degree Outcast. But at the end of the day, I can't let that influence my opinion on whether or not a book sucks or not. And this comic kind of sucks.
And you failed to mention Invincible, and I love Oblivion Song as well. So I'm definitely surprised that this movie or this comic didn't hit with you, because I do think that he's a really talented writer.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't look up what other people thought of the book. Like, I didn't look up other reviews, so maybe I'm off base here and other people think it's a work of art, but I thought that it was a bit dumb.
No, and I appreciate that, and I do the same thing and we've talked about this before. I mean, who cares what other people think? You're listening to the Nerd You're Looking For, not the nerds who read reviews that you're looking for or whatever. So, I mean, I totally get that. And we've had this discussion before, like, how can you even trust reviews sometimes? Because everybody has their bias, and maybe they're just big Kirkman fans, and they give him the benefit of the doubt, because we just had that conversation with, well, I guess it was like 6 or 7 months ago with Steven Spielberg and The Post. Like, neither one of us really liked that movie, but he was getting so much rave reviews because it's Steven Spielberg. Deservingly so, obviously. I'm obviously not putting Kirkman with Steven Spielberg, but I mean, in his genre, he kind of is that type of guy that because he's put out such great work in the past and people love him, he's kind of in that same category in his genre. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to even trust reviews sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely agree with all of that. And I think in the afterword that I was talking about, where Kirkman explains why they didn't promote this book, he talked about Scott Gimple leaving The Walking Dead, and this comic being one of the reasons he left, because he wanted to write this book. And I'm curious how much Scott Gimple wrote and how much Robert Kirkman wrote, and like what that relationship looked like around that comic. Like, did Robert Kirkman just kind of slap his name on it so that it would sell more, and it's really a Scott Gimple piece? Because like you, I typically like Kirkman's work. Like, I like what I've read of The Walking Dead. I liked Outcast. I picked up Oblivion Song. I haven't read it yet, but I mean, obviously you've spoken very highly of it, so I'm almost curious if this is a Scott Gimple jam instead, and that's why it kind of blows.
For sure, and he's the reason I'm no longer watching The Walking Dead, because his seasons are the worst.
Oh, absolutely, man. So all that being said, what'd you read this week?
Well, I'm just going to follow up on something that I talked about, a number one that I talked about a while back that I said I was going to stick with, and it's one of the rare times where I actually did stick with it, and that's TMNT Urban Legends. They just recently released the 3rd issue of that. I think it was not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before that. If you don't remember, this book was written by a guy named Gary Carlson, and then the art was done by a guy named Frank Fosco. It's being re-released by IDW. It was originally titled TMNT Volume 3. It was never finished, and like I said, they're re-releasing it, but they're also finally, once they're done re-releasing it, they're going to actually give it a finale, because, like I said, it was never finished when it originally came out. And I talked about this issue, or this book, when issue number 1 came out, and I was really positive because I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy both of the follow-up issues as well, just because it's so cool to see somebody do something with characters that you love that's so different than what you expect them to do. And this is kind of what I want books like this to do. When you're writing a book with characters that have such a rich history and mythology to them, but you know that you're not going to affect the canon at all, like, do something different. Don't play it safe. And I definitely think that they did not at all play it safe with these characters. It's super dark. Like, even for the comic book standard, like, TMNT comic is a lot darker. Like, if you just know TMNT from the cartoons and you've never read a TMNT comic, like, it's a lot different. It's a lot darker. I mean, they basically have not hid the fact that when they started TMNT, they were ripping off Daredevil. Like, that was their answer to Daredevil, and he's always been kind of a darker character. So that's kind of what they were going for when they came up with the Turtles, and it just became more cartoony when the kids show cartoon came out. So yeah, it's a lot darker, but this book takes it to a whole new level. Like, literally in the first issue, you think Donnie is dead because he's been like shot up, and then in the second issue he gets dropped out of a helicopter, and then the third issue he's like paralyzed, and there's a cliffhanger with him, which I'll be super upset if I think what I think happened did actually happen, kind of what they tease at the end of issue 3 actually happened. I'll be super pissed off. But it's so dark, and they're taking it to a whole new level, and it's definitely interesting to watch. But at the same time, when you do that, you still have to have the heart of the characters, and they're still teenagers and they still joke around. And that's what I love about this book, is they still have the heart of the characters in mind. They still joke around, even though the subject matter is super dark. They still joke around and they still seem like teenagers. And so it doesn't feel like I'm not reading a TMNT book. It still feels like I'm reading that book. It's really out there, like I said, and super dark. I will say that I think it's in issue number 3. They kind of give you like that generic like backstory, like exposition. And I thought that was kind of strange. Like, who's reading this book not knowing how TMNT became TMNT, so I just thought that was kind of strange. But other than that, I really enjoy this book. Like I said, you definitely have to be a fan of TMNT and expect it to not be the cartoon, and expect it, even by comic standards, this is dark. But I'm really, really enjoying it. I will point out there is kind of like a moment where they kind of poke fun at Wolverine, which I thought was kind of odd, but also I really enjoyed it. So they definitely don't, even though the comic is dark, they definitely don't take themselves too seriously as well.
Yeah, this was a book that I think I read the first issue and I just didn't keep up with it. I also appreciate that, they kind of try to go back to the roots with these TMNT titles that are being put out by IDW. It's just one of those things where I get so behind on it that I never get caught up. So it's not that I didn't like it. It's just not something that I was able to keep in my rotating stack of comics. But at the end of the day, I think I like my Turtles a little bit more campy, because they are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, it's just like, when you really break it down, I mean, it's a really silly concept, so I appreciate when they have fun with it. But I think that there are darker stories there to tell. Like, I think a few episodes ago, you and I talked about that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle live action movie. And, there's a portion where, isn't it Raphael is, on the brink of death, and they have him in like the bathtub of that old house. And
they go
like,
to
there's
farm,
definitely, there's definitely dark parts to that movie. But then there's also a little puppet rat doing karate too. So I think that you just got to be able to mix it well.
For sure. And it's definitely, I think this book totes that line pretty well.
Yeah. So that's good, man. Cool. So you ready for nerd news?
Yeah. I've been looking forward to this for a while now.
Yeah. So obviously it's a big weekend. It's Comic-Con weekend. Typically a lot of stories come out, and I kind of compiled as stuff broke. We are going to talk about the James Gunn stuff, but I'm going to save that for last, because I think Pat and I both have some stuff to say there. So we'll tackle the Comic-Con stuff first. And honestly, I wish there weren't really announcements this year. It was mostly just like trailers and That's it. So I have a bunch of trailers and like one news piece, and I'll kind of get your thoughts, kind of give my thoughts, and then we'll get into the James Gunn stuff if that sounds good.
Yeah, for sure. And I completely agree with you. This seemed like a very, very weak Comic-Con. Like, I know, like, Marvel didn't show up. I want to say Game of Thrones didn't show up. Like, there was like these big groups that didn't show up this year, and they were saying going into the convention, they were like, well, it won't matter because we're gonna have this and this, and then it just wasn't the same. Like, I didn't see all of the news stories that you expect to see coming out of Comic-Con.
Yeah, this almost would have, it seems like it would have been like a good year to go, because I can't imagine they have the turnout that they typically have with
For
no
sure.
Marvel, no Star Wars, none of those things. So, cool. So the first thing I have is a news story, and I don't know if you have an opinion here or not, but Batwoman is getting a show in the Berlantiverse. So I guess she's going to pop up on Arrow this season, and then she's going to get her own show on CW. And I don't know how familiar you are with Batwoman, but I forget the character's real name, but essentially she was in the army. She's a lesbian. She partners up with Batman and becomes Batwoman. I am not a giant fan of the character. She was pretty prominent in Detective Comics last year whenever it went through Rebirth, and I read that for a little bit, and I don't know what it was, but I wasn't a huge fan of the character. But that being said, as much as they tiptoe around Batman and the Batman universe in those shows, it's cool that they're finally just acknowledging it, I guess. But I don't know that she's going to be able to carry a show on her own, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not interested in this whatsoever. It's like, I like the Bat family, like Robin, Nightwing, all the Bat family, but I don't care about just like new characters. You can't just throw Bat in front of a character and then make me want to be interested in it. Like, I've never been interested in the character. I didn't read Detective Comics, so yeah, I'm not familiar with her backstory. I'm not interested in this at all. I mean, I really like the Flash TV show, but other than that, I'm not interested in that universe at all, other than the Flash TV show. So yeah, I'm not gonna watch this.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, we'll lean into DC here for a second. So I actually forgot to write this down, but you saying that reminded me that there was also a trailer for Titans.
Yeah.
Did you watch that?
So the big thing, obviously, is that Nightwing says "fuck Batman." Like, everybody's making such a big deal about that. I don't care about this show at all. Honestly, I just don't care.
So I did. I thought that, I'm like, man, like that's cool. The Teen Titans are something that really hasn't been tapped into. Like, it's cool that they're making a show like this. And then you saw like the set videos and the characters looked kind of weird. And it's like, okay, well, they'll add stuff in post-production. And then they released the trailer, and it is so over the top dark that you almost have to laugh at it. Like, Robin cracking people's necks and killing people and saying "fuck Batman." Like, come on, like, you're trying too hard at that point. And I read like some interview with Jeff Johns where he was explaining why he's so scorned in the comics. Whenever Robin initially breaks away from Batman to become Nightwing, he's really scorned and an angry kid. But that being said, like, Robin doesn't kill people, Nightwing doesn't kill people, Batman doesn't use guns. Like, it's the same shit that we've said since Batman versus Superman, and they keep having to go there. I think Beast Boy looks kind of silly, and then Starfire looks really silly. So I don't know, man. I think that if this was like the tentpole that they were going to hang this DC streaming service on, I'm pretty nervous because I don't think it looks great, and I actually did have high hopes for the show.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I have no desire to watch it. I am excited about Teen Titans Go to the Movie just because that looks really funny. Like, it reminds me of when I first saw the trailer for Lego Movie. Like, that movie shouldn't have been good, but then I was just blown away by the trailer, and I kind of felt like that has a similar type of humor. And I didn't at all think that I would care about that movie, but I'm pretty excited about it. But that is the most I've ever cared about, like, Teen Titans or whatever.
Yeah, no, that movie, whenever it was announced, I was like, okay, well, it's just for the kids that really like that show on Cartoon Network. But the trailer made me laugh a few times as well. So I do have some hopes there.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that movie.
Yeah, so a couple other trailers released by DC last night at Hall H. So we have Aquaman, which I know you put out a tweet about, but I'll let you go ahead and say your piece.
Yeah, so I thought it looked really fucking stupid. Kind of what you said about Titans is that, come on, like, learn your fucking lesson that you don't have to be serious all the time. Like, Aquaman is a stupid fucking character. Like, let's be real. It's a stupid character that got developed way back before comics were like this huge thing, and they made a silly character, and it was fine for a while, but now he's one of DC's bigger characters now, and so they're obviously making a movie out of it. But have fun with it. It just feels like they're doing the same thing Thor did when the Thor movies first came out. Is like, you have this silly character, just have fun with it. Like, it took them 3 movies to figure out that you need to have fun with this character, and I feel like DC is making the same mistake. And I don't, maybe I'm alone at this because I was reading some people's tweets, and maybe it was just because everybody is on DC's dick or whatever. I don't know, but it just, man, people are liking this trailer, and I'm like, did I watch the same fucking thing? Like, what trailer did you guys watch? That looks really fucking stupid.
Yeah, I think that Aquaman holds a place for a lot of people that like used to watch the Super Friends show, and obviously, you know, it means more to other people that are into those comics than it means to maybe you or even maybe me, because I never read Aquaman comics growing up or even currently. For me, I was really indifferent to the trailer. I kind of was hoping for more campiness too. I did watch an interview that James Gunn did with Kevin Smith on the IMDb boat, and he sold the movie really well. Like, he's very passionate about it, and he says that he really leans into the things that people give Aquaman a hard time about. So I'm hoping that the trailer's not necessarily representative of what he was going for, because he sold it really well. So maybe he sold it better than the trailer did. I did see this tweet that was fucking hilarious, and I wish I remember who wrote it so I could give them credit. But they tweeted, when Aquaman gets on the boat and says permission to come aboard, I thought he was going to fuck the boat. So I thought that was pretty funny, because that whole scene was pretty cheesy. But yeah, like, I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, we'll both see this movie and we'll review it, but I'm not any more or maybe or maybe I'm not any I'm not any more or less excited for it after the trailer. I heard that there was some Hall H exclusive footage that they didn't release online that they showed that was really great. But again, it's like, if you're in that environment and you're in that atmosphere, everything probably seems pretty great. So definitely have my expectations tempered. It was the last or second to last movie in our Rotten Tomatoes draft, so I don't think either of us are holding our breath, pun intended.
For sure. And honestly, like, going back to Comic-Con, I know that there's another trailer that we're going to talk about as well, but like, if Warner Brothers didn't have their presentation, would we have really anything to talk about?
No, not really. Like, they're the only one. I mean, it was just trailers. Like, even from a Warner Brothers standpoint, there's so many rumors out there about like a Birds of Prey movie and Joker movies and a Harley Quinn spinoff and this and that, and they didn't announce anything. They just showed trailers for movies that are already filming. And I know, like, Wonder Woman was there and showed some exclusive stuff,
which is crazy because they've only been filming for like 3.5 weeks, right?
Yeah, it's not been too terribly long. So, I mean, I'm sure that's why they didn't release it online. But it seems like they really leaned into the stuff that's actually like in development filming right now. So, which is fine. Like, I get it. So, speaking of other trailers we're going to talk about, I think this is the one where we might be more divisive.
Okay.
Shazam.
Okay. I want to hear your thoughts then first.
Okay.
I started with the Aquaman. You go ahead.
I liked it. I really liked it.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that it looked like, you know, it's kind of cheesy, but I loved the interaction of the kids, like Billy Baxton and his foster brother. It just felt like it would actually feel if a kid were in the body of Superman or like a superhero like that. So I thought some of the comedy did work. There's a part where they go to the convenience store, and I thought that was really funny. And, you know, he runs into Mark Strong's character who plays the bad guy in the movie, and he's like, "Oh, you're a supervillain, right?" Or something like that. Like, they're really leaning into the cheesiness of that character. Kind of, it sounds like what you wanted Aquaman to be a little bit. I think that it's gonna be a little divisive, but I really appreciated the tone they were going for. And yeah, man, I'm excited for it.
So I absolutely loved the trailer.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought you'd hate it.
everything that you said, I absolutely loved. I loved
really
how
thought
it
you were
was
gonna,
like it was like
just-
big.
Yeah,
It was.
it is.
It literally felt like that. Like it legitimately felt like a kid in a grown-up body, and not just a grown-up body, but a superhero grown-up body. Like I felt like that was exactly how somebody would react, and I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't stop smiling during the trailer. I just thought that they nailed it. I think that they like spot on with casting with Jack Grazer, who was Eddie in It.
Yeah,
Oh my god, that he's a talented kid, and like I think that he carries a lot of that too, because it's him interacting with Billy as a kid and then Billy as Shazam. So I mean, you definitely have to suspend your belief with a movie like that, but it does look fun, which is what we want at the end of the day. So I'm excited.
yeah. It's so weird because I don't care about that character at all. Like that trailer has made me care more about that character than anything else I've ever seen. Like even the Injustice games. Like I love those games, but I don't care about that character in those games at all. And that trailer has made me care so much more about that character than I ever thought possible.
Yeah, and full transparency, what I know about the character isn't from comics. Like he's popped up in some of the animated movies, and then like you said, Injustice. I always was under the impression that whenever Billy Baxton turns into Captain Marvel or Shazam in this case, that it's Shazam's mind. Like I didn't realize that it continues to be the kid.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And maybe that's not something that, well, I mean, I guess people would be bitching about it if it wasn't the way it was in the comics, because, everybody's like that. So, yeah, I was not on that impression as well, because all I really know from him is from the Injustice movies, or not the Injustice movies, the Injustice games. Like, I, of course, know of him, but I wasn't really familiar with him until I played those games. And they kind of give you the impression that it's not the kid anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I was excited with that take on it. Cool. Well, that's awesome that you actually liked it. So I was expecting you to hate it for whatever reason. I don't know, because you're just a bitter person with no heart. Just kidding. Okay, so I still have like 4 things here, so I'll try to go quick because I know we're running long. Godzilla. Did you watch the trailer for Godzilla, King of the Monsters or whatever?
Nope. Wake me up when King Kong comes.
Yeah, it looks really dumb. Like Mothra's in it and a couple other monsters from the older movies, but I thought it looked really terrible. So yeah, we'll see. And then there was a Fantastic Beasts panel. I didn't watch the trailer, but I did want to bring it up for one reason, and that's that the internet got pretty upset because Johnny Depp came out as I don't know his character's name, Grindelwood or Wog or what?
Yeah, close enough.
You're the Harry Potter fan, so yeah.
I mean, I know that his name, but I like you trying to say it.
But at the end of the day, it was like right before Amber Heard came out for Aquaman.
Yeah, that was weird.
People were shitty because obviously they went through a pretty rough divorce a couple years ago, and there were allegations of abuse and other things. So that was weird, a weird choice on Warner Brothers' part. But it was
in poor taste.
Yeah, and
sure.
it was weird to me that Johnny Depp came out in character. So all of that was strange. But yeah, any thoughts there besides it being in poor taste or anything about the trailer? Because I didn't watch it.
I already know what's going to happen. Like, the whole Johnny Depp thing is going to overshadow this movie. And it's a shame because I love that first movie so much. And he's such a big character kind of in the background of Harry Potter, like that mythology. And then you don't get to really see him until this movie. Like, I mean, obviously you get to see him a little bit at the end of the first movie, but this is supposed to be his movie. And the fact that they cast Johnny Depp, of course, I think they cast him before the allegations came out, but I don't know. Like, I'm so afraid that whole thing is going to overshadow my appreciation for the movie, and it's going to overshadow the entire movie. And it's just a shame because, I mean, if half of the stuff is true, about what he did, then he's a shitty person and shouldn't be getting jobs anymore. And so it just sucks that I've waited this long to see this movie, and it's going to get overshadowed. Again, him coming out in character is super in poor taste. I will say that I did watch the trailer. I don't think it really brought anything different than I already thought going into this movie, and we kind of got a teaser trailer a while back, and I don't think it really did a whole lot different. I will say that I am pretty excited about Dumbledore and Newt being together and kind of fighting together, so I think that'd be interesting. I am a little indifferent to Jude Law being Dumbledore. Like, I don't think that he's a very good actor, and so I'm interested to see how he does the character because it's done so well in the Harry Potter movies, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm so afraid that the whole Johnny Depp thing is going to overshadow this movie.
Yeah, me too, because that is one of my Rotten Tomato Film Drafts movies that I took just so you couldn't have it. So
yeah, so maybe karma will come and to bite you in the ass.
We'll see. I'm hoping it's good. One more trailer, and then we can chat briefly about James Gunn. So, did you see the trailer for Glass?
I did not, only because, and I haven't tweeted this picture out yet, but yesterday I went and rented from our library Unbreakable. For some strange reason, I forgot what the name of it was. Unbreakable and Split, because I have not seen Split, and I was just like, I need to rewatch Unbreakable because it's been a while. So I purposely didn't watch the trailer for Glass because I haven't seen Split yet. Because when that movie came out, I was like, fuck M. Night. Like, I'm done with you. Like, I'm not going to give you money. Since what was that stupid fucking movie that we watched and reviewed and they rubbed shit on their face? What was that movie called? God damn it, I hated that movie so much.
What else? You got to be more specific.
The Kids. It was like a found footage movie.
Was it? It was so not Green Inferno?
No, that's an Eli Roth movie.
Oh yeah, who are we talking? Oh, we're talking.
Same thing, same difference. But no, it's where the kids go to their grandparents' house.
The visitors.
Yeah. Right? That fucking movie, man. I was like, this is the last time I'm going to give M. Night my money. After that movie, I fucking hated that movie. And I hated it so much that everybody was like, oh, he's back now. Did we fucking watch the same movie? Because that movie is garbage.
By the way, it's called The Visit, not Visitors, just in case anybody's freaking out that was listening.
Don't watch that movie because that movie's garbage. But anyways, I was just kind of like over it, and so I never saw Split because I was like, I'm not going to do it again. Like, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though people are saying that it's really good. The idea of Glass looks so, like, it's so intriguing that I was like, man, I need to just put that away and finally watch Split. And so I was just like, well, you know what? I haven't watched Unbreakable in a while, so I decided to rent that from our local library, and I'll probably watch it tonight, actually. Maybe tomorrow. Probably tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the trailer for Glass looks really great, so it sounds like you're going to be bought in by the time it comes out in January, but anything with him, I'm kind of had minimized expectations, but we'll see. Like, I think the trailer looks good, and I like to Split as well, so definitely excited for that. And then finally, to wrap up, as promised, James Gunn was removed from directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 because of tweets that he made 10 years ago that were in poor taste around pedophilia and around rape. So, all of that being said, I think that you and I both have opinions on it. You were the one who I had seen that he had apologized for the tweets, but you had texted me that he had been fired, which shocked me. So I don't know. I've been really thinking about it the last couple of days, and it really, to be honest, kind of pisses me off that he got fired because there's a lot of factors that go into those tweets. One, it was from 10 years ago. He's the guy who made Romeo and Juliet. He made Super. He made Slither. Like, he used to be a different type of filmmaker. So Disney knew that when they hired him, which is bullshit. He deleted those tweets a long time ago, and he apologized for them in 2012. He proactively apologized on his Twitter, like saying, I was a different person then, my taste has changed, yada, yada, yada. I just don't think that something like that should cost somebody their job, especially whenever they've proactively apologized for it. I think that the comparison here is obviously to Roseanne being fired. The difference is that's who Roseanne is right now. She literally just made those tweets. This is like the kind of humor James Gunn had 10 years ago. So that's garbage to me. So it's, he built an empire for Marvel and for Disney with these Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They've really leaned heavily into them with their parks, and now with the, like, everything, the merchandise, like just everything. So he's built that up for them with a property that nobody cared about. And to just remove him so unceremoniously is really sad. And I honestly, like, not that the guy needs my sympathy, but I feel bad for him because I don't think that should have ever happened.
Yeah. So we see eye to eye on most things on the podcast. And when I first heard about it, I was like, man, I need to read these tweets because they must have been really, really bad. And I will say that they're definitely in poor taste for sure. But I didn't think they were that bad. Like, I mean, my big thing with them is I just didn't think they were funny. I just didn't get the joke there. Like, I got that he was joking, but I didn't think they were that funny. And he even said it in his recent apology the other day when it was announced that he was fired. Like, he did, like, I think a series of like 5 tweets where he kind of just apologized in detail about it. And he even said it himself. He was like, I used to say things that were in poor taste just to kind of shock people. And I saw his tweets, his tweets that got him fired before I saw that apology. And that's kind of what I thought when I read them, was like, that felt like to me somebody just trying to say something weird for the sake of being weird, for the sake of being shocking. And for me, that's lazy writing. And so that was the thing that I got most upset about. Wasn't necessarily the content of the joke, because I honestly think that if you're talented enough and you're funny enough, you can make a joke about anything, but you have to craft it in a way that is delicate, and really it just has to be a fucking unbelievable joke to joke about stuff like that. And they weren't even close. And that was my biggest problem with the joke, was it wasn't crafted in a way, and it was just shocking for the sake of being shocking. So it definitely wasn't poor taste. But the thing that really bugs me about the entire thing is the fact that, kind of what you said, was there's no way that Disney didn't know that these were out here. Like, yeah, he deleted them, but he apologized for them previous to all of this happening. Disney being the company that it is, there's no way. And really not just Disney, but like the Marvel Cinematic Universe being what it is. Like, it's, other than Star Wars, it's its biggest property. So you're not going to give that to somebody that you haven't completely vetted. So there's absolutely no way that Disney did not know about these tweets prior to giving him Guardians. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that they didn't know. The fact is, they didn't give a shit until people pointed it out and started making a big deal about it. Then they were like, oh, now we're going to throw you under the bus. I mean, that's what happened.
The thing with me is I didn't even see a lot of people making a big deal about it, except for that one guy that's like a senator or something, who was the one who unearthed the tweets. But I didn't, like, if you are on Twitter, like, there's more support out there than not for him. And it's almost bad. Like, when you texted me that, I texted, like, is it bad that I don't agree with this? Because I almost had to test the waters myself because of the climate that we're in from a cultural perspective. Like, is it okay for me to side with James Gunn on this? Because that's where I'm at. And it turns out most people are of that mindset, but it's definitely a weird time that we live in, man.
For sure. And I've heard a theory, and I don't like to get political on the podcast. So we've talked about it before. Like, you guys are here to listen to us talk about these movies and comic books and stuff and just have a good time, kind of pause the real world for a little bit. And I think it's pretty obvious where we lean, though, just the way that if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, it's pretty obvious where we lean. And I've heard a theory that he's been so, like, he bashes Trump so much that is where some of this is coming from, that people that unearthed these tweets and stuff like that are pro-Trump, and that's kind of what got him, or did him in. Not that Disney's necessarily pro-Trump, but it's just like the people that were calling for his head are pro-Trump, and that was kind of what did him in. And again, I don't want to get too political, but yeah, I've heard people float that idea before, and that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, man. I will say this. If I'm DC, I am backing up a truckload of money to his house and having him come take on something for us. That's my thought.
And it just sucks because he's talked about like Guardians 3 being the last Guardians movie. And I really wanted to see his trilogy because we've loved the first two. I mean, both of us, it's top 3 of Marvel Cinematic Universe, both of those movies. For us, I know that isn't it 1 and 2 for you? I don't think it's 1 and 2 for me, if I remember correctly.
It's not 1 and 2 for me, but it's like, I think it's 1 and 3.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close to that as well. I think it's 1 and 3 for me as well. So it's kind of a shame. I think I even texted you, or I texted somebody like, good thing that he already provided that first script. So maybe we'll still get to see most of his movie. Obviously, they'll make changes, and I wonder if they'll even give him, well, I guess if they use the foundation of his script, at least his first draft, they would have to give him credit for it. But it just sucks because it seems like they were kind of passing the torch to him to start taking over the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not just Guardians, but like the overall universe. I mean, he's a producer on Infinity War, so it seemed like they were kind of passing the torch to him, and obviously that's not going to happen now.
Yeah, I mean, so Dave Bautista put out a tweet saying he doesn't agree what's happening. Of course, his brother, who plays Kraglin and the stand-in for Rocket, put out something as well. I haven't seen anything from Zoe Saldana or Chris Pratt, but there's been a lot of articles already, like who should replace James Gunn, and everybody's saying Taika Waititi. And as much as I love him, I think that like if it's something that everybody disagrees with so much, like those actors just have to step up and kind of boycott the movie unless contractual obligations force them to film it. I think that if you support James Gunn, that's what you got to do.
I don't think there's any way that they could go back, though. Like, I get what you're saying, and it's easy to say that, but I don't know how Disney would be like, oh, never mind, we're going to hire you back. Well, like, I don't think that's going to happen.
I wonder if they just said, like, you know what, we did an investigation, and we shouldn't have termed you. Like, we would love to have you back. I wonder if he would even go back.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, man, it's just super unfortunate and leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
For sure. So, yeah. It's so weird because, like we said, like Comic-Con this year, like that's supposed to be the big thing. Like I was like super excited about this episode because we've had some kind of soft episodes as far as nerd news was concerned. I was like, man, I'm really looking forward to this episode because we're going to have all this Comic-Con news. And then we just had a few trailers, and then the James Gunn thing happened. And not that was good, obviously it wasn't. And it wasn't really anything to do with Comic-Con, but yeah, it was so weird that Comic-Con was so just not eventful.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, man.
All right. So our main topic this particular episode is we're going to finally review season 2 of Luke Cage, which was released on June 22nd. So we're definitely reviewing this a lot later than we normally review. I mean, we're always kind of like a week behind on TV shows anyways, just because we're not actual like reviewers. Like most people get like pre-screenings and stuff like that, and we're not cool enough for that. So we have to watch it like you normies out there. So we definitely have to watch it a little bit later and review it a little bit later. But it just, the schedule dictated that we were going to have to review this a little bit later, and I didn't expect it to be a month later, but it is what it is. And of course, this follows season 2 of Luke Cage follows the events of the Netflix Defenders universe, but most notably season 1 of that show. And of course, it's a MCU/Netflix series. It's 13 episodes. Each episode is about 50 minutes to like an hour long. So it is somewhat of a commitment to watch, but obviously, I'm excited to see what Tyler thought of it, but I thought just kind of a little teaser. I thought for the most part it was worth watching. Of course, Mike Coulter is back as Luke Cage, who, using his superpowers, must once again fight off Mariah Dillard's forces while also dealing with a brand new threat. All of this while also dealing with being a celebrity in the social media age. Like I said, I was excited for this show. For the most part, I'm excited for pretty much everything Marvel. The Defenders as a whole, I mean, I wasn't crazy about season 1 of Defenders, but like as a whole, it's kind of hit or miss for me. Like, I love Daredevil. I loved Punisher. I really liked season 1 of Luke Cage. Season 1 of Jessica Jones was okay. Didn't really end all that well. And then season 2 was pretty hard to watch. And Iron Fist season 1 is pretty much unwatchable for me. I will never, even if I go back and rewatch all of the Defenders Netflix stuff, I'm not watching season 1 of Iron Fist again. Like, I just can't do it. Like, 1 was enough. I feel like that was homework because we were reviewing for the podcast. So yeah, I will never watch that again. So the Defender series for me has always been hit or miss. And so I was kind of anxious to see if this show was going to be able to be as good as season 1 was without Cottonmouth, because I thought that he was such a strong villain in the season 1.
I was pretty pleased with season 1 of Luke Cage, so I was looking forward to season 2. Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of leave it at that. Like, we'll get into the review here. It sounds like you may have liked it a little bit more than I did, but yeah, I don't know. It's not as bad as Iron Fist. I'll say that.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression before we started recording, just because the way that you were talking about, oh, I had to watch the rest of Luke Cage, like, just the way that you said it, I was like, oh man, did he not like it? Like, I thought it was decent. I mean, I will go ahead and say, and we'll just kind of, this will go into our broad strokes. I didn't think it was as good as season 1, but I definitely enjoyed it. For me, it was very frustrating to watch, because I thought that it had some really great stuff, especially with some of the story aspects. I did appreciate, but it never felt like it really knew where it wanted to go, or not necessarily even that. It didn't feel like it wanted to go as far as I wanted it to go. Like, it would introduce something cool and then it would kind of pull back a little bit. And that was and that will be kind of a theme when I talk about the story. It's like, oh, I really like that, but I wish that they would have done something different, or they kind of screwed the pooch on this storyline or whatever. So that's kind of how I felt about season 2, was that I really liked that it was like introduced this or that, but then it didn't go far enough, or didn't really kind of follow through on it. And so I kind of felt like it definitely was okay. It was definitely decent, but it could have been so much better.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it introducing something and not going full-fledged with it, and I think, I mean, Heroes for Hire, like, they even say at one point, hero for hire. For whatever reason with these fucking shows, they want to just dangle shit in front of you and not give it to you. Like the first season in Daredevil with his costume, or Iron Fist in his costume, or Heroes for Hire, or just all of these things they want to just kind of tease you with, and then there's no payoff. So that's always been frustrating for these shows for me, but for the most part, they typically do put out good seasons of television. I say it with every Marvel show, so I'm just going to say it now, and I won't bring it up again for the rest of this review. 13 episodes is too many for a story like this. With that being said, you know, I mentioned liking Luke Cage season 1 and looking forward to Luke Cage season 2. I think that this is not as good as Luke Cage season 1. It's not a bad season of television necessarily, but it's bloated, and I don't think that it lives up to what it has the potential to be.
Yeah, for sure. So it does seem like we're a little bit more eye to eye than I thought we were going to be when you were kind of like talking about it before we started recording. So our first big segment of each review is we discuss in detail the story aspects of whatever we're reviewing, whether it's a movie or, in this case, a television series. And again, like I said, in broad strokes, it felt like every time they brought something to the table that I really liked, they kind of either pulled back on it or just didn't go as far as I wanted to. I really enjoyed what I'll say is kind of like the generational issues brought up in this show. There was a lot of the major players in this season were dealing with something in their past, whether it was a problem with their mother or daughter or son, father, whatever, like they all had like shit that they were dealing with. They had their baggage, and I appreciated that, especially like the father and son stuff with Luke Cage and his father in this. And mostly that's because of one of the performances, which I'll get into when we talk about performances. But I really like the father and son stuff. But that's my own personal opinion, because I've said this before, that I'm kind of a sucker for that kind of stuff, just because my dad and I haven't always seen eye to eye, and we really struggled, especially when I was a teenager. We didn't get along at all, and so that kind of struggle, I'm always going to be a sucker for that kind of storyline. So I definitely appreciated that. I will say that it wasn't necessarily fleshed out the way that I wanted to towards the end of the season. They kind of dropped it. Also, on the flip side of that, the mother-daughter stuff with Mariah and her daughter just did not hit whatsoever. It felt like an afterthought. It felt really, really forced. So on the flip side of that, I did appreciate the son-father dynamic in this show, but I really just did not care about the mother-daughter stuff. I also think that when you try to go super heavy with that type of stuff, that father-son, that generational issues, and then you have episodes where it's just, oh, Luke just needs money, like those superficial issues, just it seems kind of just not as important. And I've talked about this before, like I do appreciate when they have like superheroes and they have these like regular problems. Like I've talked about this a million times with Spider-Man, that was one of the things that I loved about him growing up, was he felt like a regular person that happened to have superpowers. But when you have all these really heavy issues, and then all of a sudden you have episodes where Luke was like doing random jobs just to make money, it just seems kind of trivial. And that, I think, is what bothered me the most, was like we have all these really heavy issues, and then all of a sudden we have an episode where he's just doing random things to make money, especially the stupid fucking Harlem Nights thing that they do, where he just like does this random tryout for this football team. And that just was super cheesy. Just, oh my God. I was like, what the fuck is happening right now? First of all, there's a couple issues with that. First of all, I get that they can't use New York Jets. Like, I get that. So they did the Harlem Jets. But the fact that they got Todd Bowles was really fucking weird to me. Tyler, I know you're a big football fan. Do you know who Todd Bowles is?
So I'm going to get into this episode for notable episodes.
Okay, cool.
For the exact opposite reason you're talking about it right now, because I loved it. Spoiler.
Really?
But yeah, I know that he works for the Jets. I don't know if he's the head coach or a coach of something else. But yes, I know that he works for the New York Jets.
He is the head coach of the New York Jets, which such a weird cameo for him to be in this. First of all, I thought it was stupid that they called it the Harlem Jets. Like, if you have to change the name, why just go with something else? Like, I don't understand that. Like, if you're going to have to change it from Harlem or from New York Jets to Harlem Jets, why not just go for it and just come up with a completely different name? And then to have Todd Bowles have a cameo, like, how many people do you think is watching this show that knows who Todd Bowles is? One person, me. I knew that was Todd Bowles. Like, you're a big sports fan, especially football, and you didn't even know. Like, I mean, obviously you knew who he was, but you didn't even know he was the head coach of the New York Jets. So, no. I mean, how many people are watching this show that get that cameo? It was such a weird little, like, side thing that happens in this show that I just didn't like. And that was the kind of thing, like, it just seemed like it wasn't as important as the other stuff that we were watching. So it was just kind of a weird thing that they did. I will say that I love the Warriors reference. Like, they do it a couple of times in a couple of the episodes, kind of the middle episodes. And I love that movie. It used to be kind of my go-to answer before I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like, what's your favorite movie of all time? And it was The Warriors. I've kind of grown away from that movie, but I do really still like that movie quite a lot. And I'm going to get into this in my notable episodes discussion, but there was a chance where they were kind of doing like a Warriors-esque episode, and I was like, man, this is going to be so cool because it's Luke Cage and he has these superpowers, and they're going to do like a Warriors, like they're on the run and everybody's kind of closing in on them, and that movie is so fucking cool, and I was so excited for it, and then it was just boring. Like, it was just a boring episode, and they never really went all in on the Warriors stuff, and so that was definitely disappointing. I absolutely hated Mariah's arc in this show. She's such a badass in the first season, and they really just they just seesawed with her throughout the entire second season, and it really bugged me because the woman that plays her, and I'm blanking on her name, is so fucking good in this show, but she's given almost nothing to work with in the second season. It's just like one scene they make her this evil genius, like mob boss badass, and then that next scene she's a drunken idiot. Like, they never really know what they want to do with this character in this season, and it really fucking bothered me. I will say the use of the music in Harlem's Paradise is really cool. Like, I know that doesn't really have much to do with the story, but I didn't really know where to throw it in. I thought that was a really kind of cool way to break up some of these episodes, so I really appreciated that. Plus, I also like blues music a little bit, and there was like this one guy that did a lot of like kind of bluesy music, and I really appreciated that. Speaking of like trying a strong female character, I really loved Misty Knight in this season. Like, she's a badass in season 1, but she really kind of, they take it to a whole new level. And you talk about like them wanting to tease a lot of stuff from the comics. They finally give her the arm that we know her of her in the comics, and I just think that she's such a total badass, and it's so cool to see her just beat the shit out of people. And I think it's really cool that they finally had this really, really strong female character. I mean, like I said, in the first season, she was a badass, but I mean, just the fact that they just take it to a whole new level in this season, I thought was really cool. Danny Rand is finally what I wanted him to be, is this kind of funny, goofy guy. Unfortunately, he was barely in this show. Like, I really was hoping that once you see him, I was like, okay, they're heroes for hire, they're teamed up, and then it kind of just goes away really quickly. They do have a cool fight scene, but yeah, other than that, it was kind of disappointing that he just kind of shows up, and as quickly as he shows up, he's gone. So, like I said, in broad strokes, it just feels like every time that I was digging this show, they kind of pulled it back or just kind of took it away.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unwrap there, and with 13 episodes of a season, like, there's a lot of story to talk about. So I'm gonna leave my thoughts kind of high level here. In all fairness, I will say I don't think that this is a show I should have binged. So I watched 9 episodes yesterday, or between Friday and yesterday. So I think that kind of takes away from a show like this because, like I said in my broad strokes, there's so much filler. I lose interest because there's just so many portions of it I don't care about. So I think it would have been a better show if I watched one episode a day. But that being said, there was stuff I liked and stuff I didn't like. A lot of the story decisions were made and I didn't like them. And I'm not going to dive in too much here, but I hate what a front row seat the character of Mariah had. Similar to you, she's so annoying, and I'm going to get more into that with performances, but the less of that character, the better, as far as the story goes in my book, because I don't even think she was a badass in season 1. Like, I know you're supposed to hate the character, but I hate the character for the wrong reasons. I think she's a dumb character. I think she's a terrible actress.
Really? I thought she was fantastic.
You're fucking kidding with me, right?
I thought see, that's the thing. That's the difference between you and I, and we've had this discussion before. It's like, where do you draw the line? Like, I thought she was written terribly, but I thought she did good with what she was given. So I think I chalked it up to bad writing versus the acting.
She's so over the top. The
character's fucking stupid in this show.
No, you and I both listened to or you did at one point. We listened to Hollywood Babylon, and they do a portion of that show where they highlight poor acting, and there were probably 6 or 7 times where there was a scene where I'm like, man, I could record that and send that to them to be on the show because she's so over the top, and it does not come around to become exquisite. It is just fucking terrible. So no, I think she's awful, and I can reiterate that point in performances, but yeah, she was almost a cartoon caricature of herself. Like, I don't know. It was bad. So so that was all the stuff I hated, and which sucks because that was a big part of season 2. And like you mentioned, she's all over the place, from being a character that you hate to you're supposed to sympathize with her, and she's working with Luke Cage, and then you hate her again, and it was just too much. That being said, I did like the arc of Luke this season, with the ending of episode 13 being the exception, and I won't spoil that, but
absolutely, we say eye to eye on that. That was fucking stupid.
Yeah. Everything leading up to that point, what he went through with his father, like you said, and what he went through with Claire, as he comes to grips with the difficulties of kind of being a celebrity in Harlem with his powers, like the relationship strains that has with those two characters is really great. And like I said, it all hits for me up until episode 13. Similar to you, I also loved Misty Knight's arc, and I appreciate all that there was building up to her getting the bionic arm. Her episode with Colleen Wing was fantastic, where Colleen basically is telling her to stop feeling sorry for herself. I thought that was great, and of course, once she does get the arm, it's pretty cool for nerds like us. I'll also say that this season was a little bit more fun in places compared to other Marvel seasons, but it still takes itself way too seriously most of the time. So all in all, I mean, there were some really good parts to the story, but there's so much filler around all of the good stuff that it feels diluted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we see eye to eye on most things. I mean, you're wrong about Mariah, but okay. I guess we can, I mean, I thought she was good. So that we can kind of move on to performances. We've said this a million times, like Mike Coulter has played Luke Cage for a while now, and he's pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say that he necessarily shines as a character, but for me, he is Luke Cage. Like, he looks the part for sure, and so that certainly helps. I will say that even though I liked the father-son dynamic, I think that Reg E. Cathy, is that his name? I think it was kind of a shame that this was his last performance, because he's fantastic in the show, but he wasn't used as much, like around the end of the second half. Like, he's basically in the first half of the show, and then you never really see him again. And that was kind of a shame, because I really appreciated his character, and I think that some of the scenes with him and Luke are some of the strongest of the season. So I really definitely loved that part of the show, and I kind of wish that they had brought him in more towards the second half. So the next thing that I'm going to bring up is not really performance-wise, because I thought that he did a decent job, but, and this is kind of strange that I'm going to have a second football reference, but are you aware that Comanche used to be a football player? Like, the guy that played Comanche is Thomas Jones, and he used to play for the Bears. He scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl that the Bears lost to the Colts, which is your favorite team. Yeah, so I was watching that, and I don't know, like, Comanche is a character. Did we see him in season 1? Like, I thought that name sounded familiar, and I was like, is he in season 1 or not? Because I saw him in season 2, because you see him in the first episode.
He's in one episode of season 1.
Yeah, because he was in the prison episode, right?
Yeah, Step Into the Arena is the name of the episode he was in.
I never noticed that was Thomas Jones until season 2, and he appears on screen, and I was like, man, that guy looks familiar. And then, like, a little bit later, I was like, that's Thomas Jones, and I had to look it up, because I was like, no way. He just is a guy that looks like this guy, like this obscure football player that nobody remembers. And it is him. And he's apparently like a legit actor. Like, this isn't the first thing that he's ever been in. And I thought that he did a decent job. It wasn't his performance. It was just the fact that every time I saw him, I saw Thomas Jones, the football player. And it just really took me out of the show. So he didn't do a bad job. For me being a big sports fan, it was just very distracting to me that he was in this show. And speaking of his buddy in the show, Shades, Theo Rossi, he does this really bad Batman voice most of the show, and it's super distracting. I just don't think he's very good as the character. So yeah, that really threw me off. There's a couple of scenes. I think it might be when he's getting interrogated. Like he's just really like throwing on thick in that scene, and I just really just didn't like his performance at all. Speaking of a voice, Bushmaster's accent in this show, and I don't even know if it's a bad accent because I just don't know Jamaican accents. It's so thick in this show that there was several scenes that he's in that I had to rewind multiple fucking times to understand what he was saying. And there was a couple of scenes where I just had to move on because I was like, I'm just never gonna know what he's saying right there because it's so thick. And like I said, I don't know if it's a bad accent, but it was super thick and it was super distracting. It was so bad that I had to look it up to see if he was even Jamaican, which he's not. The guy that plays him, Mustafa Shakur, I think is probably not how you pronounce it, but I gave it a shot anyways. I thought he was good, but his accent was super thick and it was very distracting. And then I'll end it with a couple of smaller characters that I absolutely fucking hated. The detective Noddy Taylor, he doesn't play a huge role. She was fucking awful. She was so bad. She was so cheesy every time she was on screen. I was like I cringed. She was so bad. And so was Gabrielle Dennis, who is Mariah's daughter. Like, I didn't buy that whole storyline, but she was really bad, especially when she was asked to cry. She's a super ugly crier. Like, it was hard to watch her cry. Like, it was really bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on just about everybody. So, I mean, there wasn't too much. I disagree in that. I would say Mike Coulter, like he's getting there, but he's not quite there yet. I don't think he's an amazing actor, but he's definitely starting to get a little bit more comfortable. And there were parts of the season where he shined, and then parts of the season where he was kind of like a robot. So, hopefully he'll keep working on it. He'll get where he needs to be. I think that Simone Missick is fantastic as Misty Knight. I also appreciate Finn Jones as Iron Fist, Danny Rand, in this season in his one episode more than any of his appearances in Iron Fist or The Defenders. So that was cool. Rosario, she's only in the first half of the season, but she's amazing in anything she does. I love her to death. She's my celebrity crush, and she can do no wrong. So she's amazing. And then just to reiterate, Alfre Woodard is garbage. She's a garbage actress. At least in this show.
Nah, brah. I wasn't going to bring it up because I literally have a note in there saying she's fantastic. Dude, and I was I'm not going to bring it up again because I don't want to start this conversation again.
I would never watch this season of television again, but I might do it just to send you snippets of her poor overacting. Because
I don't care. I'm still going to chalk it up to bad writing. They did not know what to do with this character.
Who did you say Mustafa Shakir? He was Jamaican me crazy.
God damn it.
No, I mean, you said it. His accent was way over the top, but I mean, the fact that you had to look up, and I did the same thing. We had to look up if he was Jamaican or not. I mean, there was a hint of something in his accent that made us think that he might actually be Jamaican, so it can't all be that bad, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there's some other actors that are really great in the show. I forget his Reg E. Cathy, I think is what you said it was.
Yeah.
Like he's great in everything he does. It's unfortunate that he's passed away, and that they'll never really resolve some of the things from this show that they started between him and Luke. And then I really like Ron Jones, who plays Bobby Fish. I was disappointed that he left the show partway through the season to move out to the West Coast to give his daughter a kidney transplant as well, because I feel like he's kind of the heart.
Yeah, you kind of forget that he's in that show. That's right.
Yeah, like he's like the heart of Pop's barbershop, and he's kind of Luke Cage's conscience in a few scenes. So I thought it was strange that he bailed, but I think that might play a part in why Luke makes some of the decisions he makes in episode 13. But yeah, like, not a ton of poor performances except for Mariah. So
no. Bad writing, not bad performances. Anyways, let's move on to action because we are going kind of long on this episode. So for me, the action's cool, but with Luke, it kind of gets to that gray area where it gets kind of old, where we talked about like he punches people through walls and he's bulletproof, and that stuff does get old somewhat quickly in this show. I will say that Bushmaster, his style is really, really fucking cool. And I think that him being in this show definitely breaks it up and definitely makes it watchable. Because, like I said, if it was just Luke Cage throwing people through walls and being bulletproof, I think I would get bored with that so quickly. But the fact that Bushmaster is in this and he's just as strong as Luke Cage, but he kind of has a different style, I think that it really kind of brings a breath of fresh air into the show. And I really liked the episode when they kind of fought together, because it felt like Bucky and Cap from Civil War. Like, they're kind of fighting with each other, but almost kind of against each other at the same time. So I definitely appreciate that. Again, Misty Knight was just so fucking cool. Her bar fight with, and I forget the character's name, the Asian woman from Iron Fist, that was cooler than anything that we saw in season 1 of Iron Fist. Like that one scene was so fucking cool. Speaking of Iron Fist, like him being in the show was really cool, and I liked that he was more of a chill character and more of a funny character. And they definitely listened to some of the criticisms of Iron Fist season 1, and I'm hoping that they fix a lot of that stuff. Like I said, I'm never going to see Iron Fist season 1 again, but I definitely hope that they fix some of the problems they had with Iron Fist season 1 in further seasons of the Defender series. So I will say that he just needs a fucking mask. You just need to give him that mask, because you're never going to have good action scenes with this character if Finn Jones has to do most of it. Because obviously they have a stand-in for his flippy dudes and stuff like that. But because you see his face, he has to do most of it. And he's so fucking slow. Like, I don't know that much about martial arts, but I've had conversations with people that I am friends with that have black belts, and they're like, I can't even fucking watch because it's so slow. I have a buddy that I work with that is black belt, and his favorite character is Iron Fist, and he can't watch it because it's so bad. They just really need to give him a mask so they can have somebody fill in for those scenes. Like, obviously Charlie Cox can't fight like Daredevil, but he has a mask on, so it doesn't matter. So they just have somebody that can do it for him, and that's why Daredevil looks so cool. And Iron Fist could be cool if they would just do that for him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And for what it's worth, I didn't watch the footage that they played at Comic-Con for season 2, but apparently there was a look at him in the mask. So hopefully, I think they're headed that route. But I think that's a great idea. Like, I've never thought of it that way. Like, you don't want to do the mask for the character because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if it makes more sense to be able to film great action, like, just go for it. Like, no fan is going to complain about what that mask looks like, because we're just going to be so happy that it's comic accurate. So the fact that they haven't gone that route yet surprises me.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the best martial artist in the fucking world, and Daredevil could kick his ass. I'm pretty sure that I could kick his ass because he's so slow. Like he's like punching in slow motion. I mean, I could kick his ass, but I'd like to think like
a little guy. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about the action. There was definitely some highlights and lowlights. I think my favorite action scene was actually the bar fight between Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, and then those dickholes at the bar.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I thought that was awesome.
I thought it was amazing, and her fighting with one arm, and Colleen like being hesitant to help her at first, and then of course she gets in it, and I thought that was a fantastic fight. I did enjoy the Luke Cage Iron Fist stuff, even though, like, the Powerball special and all that cool stuff. But is that what it's called in the comics? Is it?
I don't remember. If not, it should be called the Powerball special.
It's called something when like Colossus throws Wolverine, and I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But I might have flubbed that, so I'm sure our nerds that listen will let me know. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely
definitely let Tyler know, but do it at Tyler Hunt. I don't want to see it.
No, there was some great action. Like, I can't think of anything that was like, all right, this is bad. So except for Iron Fist here and there.
All right, so moving along, when we review seasons of television, we also like to point out a couple of what we call notable episodes. There's 13 episodes, so we're only going to pick out a couple, so obviously just a small portion, and it feels like we may have a couple of different episodes that we're going to talk about, so maybe we'll actually hit 4 episodes. So what's your first notable episode?
My first is episode 2, called Straighten It Out, like I was alluding to.
The fucking Harlem Jets episode.
Yeah, so
God,
here's
how
why.
can you watch that and think this is the episode I want to talk about?
So here's why. So as a sports fan, yes, it's cheesy because you know there's no Harlem Jets team. You know who that coach is, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, that episode was fun. And it shows Luke Cage embracing his powers and putting on a show. And that's what I want from this character, not, the stuff that happens in episode 13 that I'm not going to mention. Like, he should have fun and he should be doing that kind of stuff and being like the mascot of Harlem. So that's the stuff I like with the character, the more lighthearted stuff, as opposed to Mariah burning somebody and then shooting them because they're not dying fast enough. Like, that's fine, whatever. But I'd rather see that kind of stuff because that leads into an eventual Heroes for Hire where he needs money and him and Iron Fist team up. Because that's what I want out of this character. I want Power Man and Iron Fist, not some of the stuff we get in the later episodes. So I appreciate the fun that they tried to have there and how he was faster than Usain Bolt and throwing that tire around and things like that. I thought that was cool.
Oh my God, the fucking tire. I forgot about the goddamn tire. That was so stupid. It was so stupid. I hated it so much.
That's such a random thing to hate so much.
Oh my God, I hated it so much. And the way that he like smiles after he does it, I was like, God damn it. I actually thought that they were going to do like a little like where he's going to wink and then the little wink sound effect. I was like, God damn it. Like, that's how cheesy it was. Like, I thought that they were going to kind of lean into how cheesy it was. And it was just, oh my God, I can't take you seriously now.
So you just talked about
stupid.
That's dumb because you talked about in the Aquaman trailer, like it takes itself too seriously. This fucking show takes itself too seriously. Why do you have different standards for Aquaman compared to Power Fist? Or Power
Fist.
Man. Power Man.
I wish he was called Power Fist. Power Fist
Power
is
Man.
Powerball special. No, I mean, I guess I am kind of talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth. I don't think Power Man is that ridiculous of a character, though. Aquaman talks to fucking fish. Like, I think that's stupid. I don't know. We've seen the first season of it, and you can argue that, we've said that we wanted it to be a little bit more lighthearted because that's who those characters are, but they didn't make that choice, and it is what it is. Like, they didn't make that choice, but just to have this random episode and you have some of this heavier stuff surrounding it, it felt cheesy to me. And that was my problem. It just felt so out of place. And you could argue that it shouldn't be out of place. And that's how the show should be the whole time, but it's not. So it feels weird and cheesy. Plus the tire thing looks stupid.
I mean, in all fairness, it's cheesy that Aquaman talks to fish, but it's also super cheesy that an actor like Mike Coulter talked to Alfre Woodard, who plays Mariah, because that's just as cheesy with how her performance was.
That was a stretch, man. You could do better than that.
It sounded better in my head. It sounded a lot better in my head.
That was your Disney joke this episode.
All right, we both get one strike for this episode. That's
exactly. So my notable episode, and I've kind of already talked about this a little bit, so I'll be short, is I think it was episode 9. It was kind of like the Warriors-esque episode where he has Piranha, and they're kind of trying to stay away from these guys are kind of closing in on him, and he has a hit out on him. And honestly, like, I was super excited for this episode because I was like, oh, here we go. We're going to get like the Warriors. Like, they made that reference. I think it was actually they made the reference in the previous episode. And I was like, oh, man, here we go. We're going to get this like Warriors-esque episode and they're going to be like closing in on them. And it was just like they completely slowed down the episode and it was just kind of them chilling. I think there was there was kind of a cool fight, and I maybe it was in the next episode, but that did kind of save that episode towards the end. But it was just it was very, very disappointing because I really wanted it to be like that movie, and it just never ended up being that. And so I was definitely disappointed in episode 9.
Yeah. Cool. Sorry, I got distracted by something going on outside my window. My bad. Am I on to my next notable episode?
I think it'll probably end up being the same episode, right? Are you going to talk about the season finale?
No, I was going to talk about episode 10.
Okay, cool.
It's called The Main Ingredient. I don't have a lot to say here because I already kind of talked about it in story, performances, action. But yes, this is the episode that Iron Fist shows up. I thought that the dialogue between Iron Fist and Luke Cage in this episode was so much fun. And that's what we're looking for, right? It's like what we keep saying. Like at the portions where they're in the barbershop and DW like interjects and says he's going to put this on a shirt, and Luke doubting Iron Fist with actually fighting a dragon, and I really liked all of their dialogue back and forth. So that's an episode that stood out for me.
Oh, are you done? I was distracted by my phone.
No, in all seriousness, it sounds like somebody was like literally in my backyard. So I was like fight or flight for a second. Like, what the fuck are you doing back there?
You're definitely a flight kind of guy. You're a ball sack.
I'm a ball sack.
From earlier?
Yeah. Anyway, strike two.
I was legitimately distracted because I just saw something on Reddit about how 50,000 people have signed a petition for Disney to rehire James Gunn. Anyways, that was just.
I'll sign that petition.
And also, I wanted to make the joke about how I was distracted while you were talking. But yeah, that was a good episode. I feel like that would have been my third episode if I had talked about a third episode, and I'm glad that you brought it up because it was really fun. I forgot about the dragon thing, but the dragon thing was really, really funny. I love that he was like, "Oh, you mean like a metaphorical dragon?" So I thought that was really cool. That it kind of poked fun at how silly the first season of Iron Fist is. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the season finale. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil what happens in the last about 15 minutes of it, but it just felt like that just didn't need to be in it at all. It just felt like somebody it almost felt like a completely different character. Like, it doesn't feel like Luke Cage would make that decision. And it just, I don't know. It just kind of, it puts you in such a weird mind space. Like, that's such a weird way to end that season.
Yeah, it is. And I just felt out of place for the character. Like you said, it doesn't feel like a decision he would make. And I don't know, it felt like The Godfather, but like not in a good way, like in a bad way that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Cool. So you ready to put a star rating on this?
Yeah, just real quick. I think 3 stars because I do think that they introduced some cool stuff, but again, they just pulled it back every single time.
Yeah, 3 stars for me as well.
All right, so last segment real quick, because I think this is like one of our longest non-Matt Hurt from the Obsessive Viewer episodes, which is surprising because typically when we have something that we review kind of late, they're usually pretty short. But anyways, we're going to do a nerd favorite, sort of. It's my week this week, and I want to talk about a character that we haven't seen yet in these Marvel Defender series that you really want to see in one of these shows. And I'm going to use the most obvious of obvious answers. Obviously, he's one of my favorite characters of all time. He is by far my favorite Marvel character, and I would absolutely love it to see Tom Holland as Spider-Man in Daredevil, because they are such good characters that work so well together and essentially are friends in the comic books. Like, I've talked about this before, like Spider-Man was my jam, like growing up. And a lot of what I know from Marvel for a long time was because I just read Spider-Man and they would come into a Spider-Man comic. And that's how I knew them. And that was kind of my thing with Daredevil for a long time, was I knew of the character, and a lot of the information I knew of the character was because he hung out with Spider-Man so much. Like, they did so many team ups. Like, the first time I ever saw Kingpin was actually in a Spider-Man comic. The first time I ever saw Elektra was in a Spider-Man comic. So those are big Daredevil villains, and I knew them through Spider-Man. And so I just think that would be so fucking cool. They're never going to do it. I don't think that the Defenders are ever going to become part of the MCU, like the actual movies or vice versa. So I doubt that they're ever going to do it, but it would be really cool because the characters are so close to me.
Yeah, and that's the biggest bummer for me is, whenever they announce these shows and they announce like the Defenders, it was part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? So you would think that eventually these characters would cross paths, most notably probably in something like Infinity War, kind of like was the thought process for me, at least back in the day. And that's obviously not the route that they've chosen to go with these shows. And that's disappointing, especially with a character like Daredevil, because in the comics, he does play a larger part of the Avengers and the happenings in New York and even globally in some cases. So he does interact with Spider-Man a lot, and that's something that I really would like to see. So it's disappointing that it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. As far as a character I'd like to see pop up on the show, like I think any of the big characters are no-brainers, like obviously Spider-Man or any other characters that are based in New York, like Doctor Strange. But I'm going to go a different route and say Justin Hammer. So
really,
yeah. So obviously, like his name keeps popping up like periodically, even though he hasn't been on anything Marvel related since I think the Hail to the King one shot. But then, of course, most notably Iron Man 2. And of course, he's played by Sam Rockwell. And I think in the universe, he's still in prison. But, there were still hammer tech used in season 2 of Luke Cage. So they keep name dropping his company. So I'd love to see that character reemerge. If you wanted me to go something more superhero-y, I think Blade is an obvious answer. There was a rumor at one point.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
Getting a Netflix show. So I think that there's a place for him in this universe as well. But yeah, one of those two.
Cool, man. So again, we're going a little long, so I'll cut my little outro short. Just basically do all of those things that I said at the beginning when you were actually still listening. And as always, my name is Patrick Kuhn.
I'm Tyler Hunt.
And we are the nerds you're looking for. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.